Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to be joined by Alex Belcher. On today's episode, we will focus on how his musical career started, his collaboration with composer Henry Jackman, and of course his new score 21 Bridges, which he also co-scored with Henry Jackman. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
My
And
pleasure.
Alex, at first, I would like to know a little bit more about your musical background.
Well, I think like all professional musicians and composers, I started playing music very young and knew from a pretty early age that that's what I wanted to pursue as a career. And so when I was um, looking at colleges, I was focusing on schools of music and ended up studying at a couple of great music schools, Berklee College of Music being one of them, and Belmont University in Nashville being the other. And while I was there, I was really focused on composition and arranging, and that kind of morphed into my discovery of film music as an option for a profession. So while I spent a lot of time playing jazz and playing blues when I was in Nashville, I really started to hone in on my orchestral chops around that time, and really started to pursue film music as a passion. And then I moved once I graduated college. I moved out here to Los Angeles and got really lucky. And in that, within I think a month or two of moving out here, I landed a job working here at Hans Zimmer Studio, just doing some grunt work. And that's where I met Henry Jackman, who was looking for someone to help him out on Winnie the Pooh. And so that was my first collaboration with him. So I was making noises, doing some technical support, and that's really where our Henry and I's collaboration began. And I got really lucky in that I just kind of showed up at the right place at the right time. I don't know, a lot of people's stories aren't that uh, as easy as mine was, but yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here, and that's how Henry and I's professional relationship got started.
Great. And Alex, if you examine the history of movies and the history of movie music, is there any film and or score in particular which fascinated you the most back then? What was the point when you said, well, I want to pursue a career as a film composer?
It would probably have to be both the film and the score. I think are two of the greatest in each of those categories, which is Vertigo, the Alfred Hitchcock film with the score by Bernard Herrmann. I remember I was a teenager when I first saw that film, and immediately, I just started studying classical music at that point, and I immediately fell in love with the score. And throughout college and my young professional career, I constantly referenced that. It shaped who I was as a composer and what I wanted to do. And um, I got Henry and I got really lucky, and that was one of the ways that we bonded was over films like Vertigo and the early Hitchcock films and films of that era. And that's why Henry and I's like friendship sort of was sparked by our shared love in films like Vertigo.
Great. I mean, that's a very good choice, actually. I mean, many people opt for the Bernard Herrmann Hitchcock collaboration, and it's a sure winner actually because they have worked together so many times and they produced great results. So that's definitely one of the most fruitful director-composer relationships in history.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
And if I'm not mistaken, Alex, you had started working with Henry back in 2011.
It was actually 2010. The first, the way that these films go, you work on them for a long time and then they come out sometimes a year later. So it was actually 2010. Henry and I first started working together, and I was helping him out. I believe Winnie the Pooh was the first one, or X-Men First Class. I can't remember which one started first, but they were right around the same time.
Right.
But yeah, so it's been almost coming up on 10 years, I think.
Yeah, time flies, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And Alex, which tasks did you have to face or handle at the beginning when you started working with Henry, and as of when did your responsibilities grow a little?
It didn't take long. At that point in Henry's career, he had done, Monsters versus Aliens and Gulliver's Travels, and his career was very young. And so, he was just looking. His career was starting to take off, and he was looking for any help that he could get doing anything, um, just because of how successful he was becoming. And so in the early days, it was lots of grunt work, but making noises, messing around on synthesizers, creating instruments, and doing that sort of thing. And as his career sort of took off, my role sort of morphed and became a little more uh, defined on the creative side of things after a couple of films and a year or so. And and uh, you know I, I i wouldn't attribute that to anything other than like that's what Henry was needing at that point, and I had just been around for some of his early films, so it was a natural fit for him, I think, to ask me to help out on that stuff and start contributing and doing some arranging and additional composing. And from there it morphed into the co-writing. Our first collaboration as a co-write was IO, which just came out this year.
Yeah.
And we've got 21 Bridges, which has just come out, and we've got another one coming out next year called DACA, another Russo produced
Right.
movie. So those the things are very malleable, these courses, and these when you have a professional relationship that spans that amount of time, that it's hard to say in the early days exactly what my job was. Henry was just a guy who had just gotten into the industry, and he was starting to have quite a bit of success, and I was just trying to help him any way I could. And that meant doing lots of different things, from writing some smaller cues to making instruments to doing sampling sessions to playing guitars and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a catch-all back in the early days.
And as I understand, you had also worked on Captain Phillips with Henry. With Henry, you were the synth programmer.
Yeah.
And as I've been told, Captain Phillips might not have been the easiest project to work on. And did Henry send you a cue for which you then added some synth sounds, or did you assemble a certain sounds, or did you kind of produce certain sounds which he would then use for a cue?
Yeah, it was more of the latter. I mean, there were certain things where you would Henry would sketch out an idea, and then because so much of that score was not orchestral, Henry adopted a little bit of a different approach when writing it, in that he would produce a lot of the sounds that we would help him make, and then he would sort of sketch that out, and then in the room together, everyone would sort of with the directors and the picture editors and all that, sort of combine the thing. So that was a very fun score, and it was very collaborative in that regard. It Every film is tough. I think if you speak to any composer, like, it's very difficult because you've got to reinvent the wheel every single time, and you've got to do it in a way that hasn't been done before. And on a film like Captain Phillips, what made that one so tough was the performances on screen were so incredible, that we really had to fight, and I think Henry did a great job of not letting the music overshadow what was happening on screen and get in the way of some of those brilliant performances. So that's what made that project tough, was just writing that line of trying to help support the story and help support the narrative without making it feel too much like a overproduced Hollywood action film. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I know Henry is very proud of that score, and I'm very proud to have played a small role in helping that film get across the finish line.
And on other projects that you worked on, you had a technical score engineer credits, X First Class, for instance, or Abraham Lincoln, The Vampire Hunter. And could you explain to our audience what a technical score engineer does?
It's sort of it's a catch-all phrase. It's a and it can encompass a lot of different things. And per film, it might mean something else. You know, it's not like a standard sort of job description, but it basically means a lot of the technical things involved in getting the score done. Things like creating and managing instruments, making sure that the studios and the rigs that everyone's writing on are working correctly and working harmoniously together, um, and sharing sounds so that there's continuity. Um, so but it can also include things like making instruments and making some of these sounds and producing aspects of the cues and things like that. So it really is. It's sort of a catch-all, and like I described earlier with, what the dynamic was early on in Henry and I's professional career. That term, technical score advisor, technical score engineer, is kind of the best thing that you can call what that malleable job is. It's a catch-all. It encompasses a lot of different aspects of the process. That it can include some creative things and a lot of technical things as well, making sure that the score is done not only written, but also making sure that the technical side of things are nailed and to a very professional standard.
And Alex, if I may ask, is there any project of your early days which you would describe as a baptism by fire situation?
I think any of those first two. I was like X-Men First Class or Winnie the Pooh. Henry took a gamble on me. I didn't have any experience in the industry other than having studied music and known quite a lot about computers and technology and music technology. So those first couple of films, as with anyone in any aspect of the filmmaking industry, your first couple of projects are the ones that really make you or break you, I think. And for me, I got lucky in that Henry was very understanding, and he was very much a mentor and showing me the ropes, and I had help from other people as well. So I think those first two were the ones where I really started wrapping my head around what the job was of being a film composer. When you study it in school or you study composition, you can wrap your head around the theory and the harmony and the arranging. And then intellectually, you understand what being a film composer is. But until you actually are on the front lines and helping someone, especially a great composer like Henry, I think it's hard to kind of know the day-to-day struggle of being a film composer and what that entails, and what
Oh,
that
yes.
job actually means. But I learned that on the first two, on Winnie the Pooh and on X-Men First Class, and I learned a lot from Henry not only over those films, but the subsequent 6 or 7 years after that we've worked together.
How would you describe your first insight into the business as far as spotting sessions and also meetings with the filmmakers are concerned?
It's very collaborative. That's the first thing that you learn. I think people sort of have it in their mind, and I know I was guilty of this when I was young, that when they see, the big title card that says music by Alex Belcher or music by Henry Jackman and Alex Belcher, you think that, oh, every note that you hear, they just thought of and they did it. And that was what, their idea. And I think the one thing you learn early on when you get into this is how collaborative that process actually is. It's not, it all starts with the director and the producers and their vision for what the score should be. And then the composer works, alongside them to really be the mouthpiece for the director's vision, not only for the score, but for the film. And so when you see music by, fill in the blank, what you're really seeing is that's the person that was the creative, that ferried the director's idea into the musical medium, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does, absolutely. And thank you for sharing this story with me. And previously, you had mentioned I.O., which you also co-scored with Henry. I think this was your first kind of official collaboration with him
Yeah.
when you two shared co-credits.
Yes.
And could you please tell me how you and Henry handled the post-apocalyptic setting musically?
it was this was that film was a lot of fun from a musical standpoint because we were dealing with the story was dealing with all of these giant ideas, the earth ending, mankind coming to an end, fleeing, um, love, loss, all of these huge emotional narrative um, devices. But at the same time, it's a very intimate film. There's only, for most of the film, there's only two people on screen, and in total, there's only three. So that was a very fun dynamic to play off of musically because you've got all of these big ideas in this very intimate setting that felt to us very much like theater, like a play. And I love theater. I grew up working in theater. So I loved IO for that very reason. So we got to be intimate yet um, in some cues and very vast and gigantic in other cues. And there's not a lot of films that give you the real estate to do that sort of thing. So that's how we dealt with some of the bigger things like the death of humanity or the race to try to save humanity against climate change and all of that. Again, it was to a very intimate backdrop, so it allowed us to kind of narrow our focus on a lot of the emotional narrative and be small and intimate with while at the same time on the bigger cues like going massive, having a giant string orchestra doing their thing. And so it was a lot of fun, that film, and Henry and I really loved it for that very reason, is we got to kind of do both things.
And when you finished IO, did you and Henry say, well, if the next film, or as soon as the next film comes along, we want to collaborate again, or did 21 Bridges come about for a different reason?
Um, 21 Bridges kind of came about not too long after we had finished IO. So and to be honest with you, I honestly can't remember if IO was over yet or not before Joe Russo called and sent us the script for that one. But it was around that same time we had finished IO, and um, we're looking forward to what to do next. And it happened very organically. Is about the only thing I can say. Joe sent us the script. We had a conversation. Henry and I read the script and loved it. And then we chatted with Brian, who had started filming. Brian Kirk, the director, and yeah, it kind of organically happened, and we were very happy because we loved the script, we loved the movie, and we were lucky that we got to write, a score. Speaking of guys like Bernard Herrmann, who you ask who was a big influence on me, and I think every film composer would say that Herrmann is a big influence. But one of the things that Henry and I loved about the script and were excited about was that we had talked for years, even before IO, about being able to collaborate together on a film that would allow us to write music that we could, that was in the same vein of some of those, late 50s to early 70s noir thrillers, um, of which Herrmann was a master. And we had tried a couple of times and never quite found a film that could work. And so when Joe Russo sent us this script and Henry and I read it, we were like, oh, this is the one. We can totally do this if they let us. And then when we had our first conversation with Brian Kirk about it, he unprompted was like, what would be great on this, guys, is like a Bernard Herrmann type score. And Henry and I were like, well, that's exactly what we were thinking. And then at the first screening that they had of early footage, we were all there, and Joe Russo leaned over and said to us, again, unprompted, he's like, oh, what would be really cool is like a Bernard Herrmann 70s noir score for this. So from the very get-go, everyone was on the same page, and Henry and I were very excited to get started because we kind of had the green light to write a score that we had always talked about, and wanted to write.
For those in the audience who haven't seen the film yet, how would you describe the concept of the movie? I mean, I'm sure many people know it's about a cop who basically joins the force because his father had been killed, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah.
it's also about he tries to stop or bring down a group of cop killers. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit for the audience.
Yeah, it's a tough one to elaborate too much on because you don't want to give a lot away. But what I will say is it's a film where the main character, Andre, he's very much involved in the culture of being a police officer. It's part of who he is. You know, there's a line that says, you know, it's in his blood to be a police officer, and with that comes a lot of uh, different responsibilities and different loyalties, and that he fights throughout the film. The loyalty to the badge, the loyalty to the law, the loyalty to his fellow cops, loyalty to the citizens of New York. And so I think that what I loved about the film was the film kind of tracks Andre's journey through this manhunt, which is, you know, at its core, that's what this movie is. It's a thriller. It's a crime manhunt. But the great thing about the story is that you're really following Andre's journey on this manhunt as he tries to be true to all of these different loyalties that are at time conflicting with one another. And so musically, when you're a composer and you get a script like that, you eat it up, because that opens up a lot of possibilities with the music, because you can then tell a story with the music that isn't happening on screen. So while Captain Phillips, the score for Captain Phillips was, you know, we had to sit way back and let the movie do most of the storytelling. 21 Bridges was the exact opposite, where we got to do a lot of the storytelling that you weren't seeing on screen with the music. And it made that process a whole lot of fun.
If I'm not entirely mistaken, the film's initial release date had been postponed, and depending on how early you got involved, did this at some point or in any way impact your scoring process?
No, actually, not at all. A lot of films move around these days. They move around the release dates for, you know, various reasons. I'm not a studio executive or a marketing guy, so I wouldn't comment on why that is, but I'm sure people have good reasons. But no, I mean, creatively, it didn't really affect us or the filmmakers at all, and it wasn't you know, as far as I know, there were no creative decisions involved in that. What I will say about the process of working on 21 Bridges, again, to kind of reiterate, the great thing about it was everyone involved, from the studio to the Russo brothers, to Brian, to us, as well as you know, the picture editors. We all knew the film that we were making, and we knew what we wanted it to be, and that it was a very rare instance where there wasn't that much difference between what we wanted to do musically with what the studio wanted, with what the Russos wanted, with what everyone was on board, and that made the process a lot of fun. So, you know, when the release date got you know, moved around, the only bad thing was that we were excited for people to see the film, and they were just gonna have to wait a little longer. So that was, you know, that's the only way it affected us. So
And how did you and Henry write music for a modern action thriller? I mean, the business has changed so much, and of course, action movies today are different, you know, than they used to be 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and even thrillers have changed. How do you, or how would you describe that, the modern action thriller, and how it needs to be scored?
well, I think 21 Bridges is a little bit of an outlier in that, and that there's a lot of great modern thrillers that have modern scores that I think work really, really well. 21 Bridges was great because we kind of turned backwards. We knew how to do a modern thriller score. We knew what that sounded like. But on this one, we turned backwards into, you know, the annals of film music, and really focused on the late 60s, you know, or late 50s to the early 70s. And we looked at, you know, we poured over the original manuscript scores for Bernard Herrmann scores, for Jerry Goldsmith scores, like for Chinatown, for David Shire score for Taking of Pelham 123, Quincy Jones's score for Money. We listened to those. We studied the sheet music, and we had this in our head of what we wanted to do. And once we had all that knowledge at our fingertips, then we dove into the creative process. And we did have to go, okay, how do we make this relevant to 2019? It can't sound too pastiche. It's got to honor the scores that we're trying to imitate, but at the same time, it's 2019. It needs to sound like that. And one of the ways we did that was with engineering and recording and the types of, you know, instruments that we use. But we still tried to, with all the modern technology and miking techniques and all of that, we still tried to pay homage to those scores that we were, you know, so excited to imitate.
How did you and Henry divide the work on 21 Bridges? Did you say, well, I will handle the first half of the movie, you will handle the second one, or how did this actually work?
Yeah, it wasn't. It's a weird one when you do a co-write like that. It's not as like, oh, you're gonna do this cue and you're gonna do this cue. It's a very collaborative process, and that ideas get thrown around. We spent a lot of time, especially early on, sitting at a piano, coming up with doing the actual composition. The work of actually putting the music to each individual scene is only one aspect of the filmmaking process, and a lot of the time that Henry and I were writing the score, it was us together looking at pictures, sitting at a piano, um, mapping out our ideas. And then from there, then it becomes like a team effort of, okay, well, we've got to do some demos, and we've got to, let's put some perk here and let's put some guitars here. So let me do the guitars. You can do the perk over there. So it was very collaborative on the second half of that, which is, assembling each scene. But the composition was really the two of us sitting on a piano bench, awkwardly close, writing and coming up and sort of jamming these different compositional ideas. And that was really fun because it felt collaborative, and that's what you want when you do one of these co-writes. Is you want that collaborative feeling, the feeling of two people, two minds working at the same time. And so that's really how we got through this film, and it made it a very fun process, albeit I think by the end of it, we were tired of sitting so close to each other to each other on the piano bench, but we got there at the end. And I think we're going to invest in a bigger piano bench next time.
Might be a good idea.
Yeah.
And Alex, I must say the album feels very homogeneous.
What I will say is one of the reasons why it's so homogeneous, and I hope that it's so homogeneous, is because we had the benefit of working together and work. I had the benefit of working with and for Henry for so long that we both know each other's musical taste. We know what the other one would do musically. So from cue to cue, we're able to, the homogeny comes from the fact that, that's the culmination of almost 10 years of working on films for Henry and with Henry. So the homogeny is great. And I don't want to ruin the allure and maybe the head scratching that some people will want to do. But yeah, that score and that homogeny comes from two people knowing each other very well and working closely for a long time. And that, I think, was, the benefit to doing the co-write with Henry, was that, we knew each other. We know what we're going to do musically. We know how each other are going to approach a different type of scene, whether it's an action scene or a dialogue scene. And yeah, I mean, we're both really proud of the score in how it turned out that way. It didn't feel, it's a thing when you do co-write, you always worry about exactly what you just described. You don't want it to sound like two different people with two different ideas. You want it to sound like one original thought. And we worked really hard at that. And part of writing the cues from a piano, together really helped to do that. The one thing I will give you on that is that obviously the guitars and the basses are me. I played all of that, and then Henry played all of the piano on the score. We recorded the guitars here in Los Angeles and recorded the piano where we recorded orchestra at Abbey Road. So that was a lot of fun for both of us because Henry got to produce me in the sessions for guitars, and then I got to be on the other side of the glass for the piano to exact some revenge on him while he was recording at Abbey Road. Right. So, but again, the actual creative aspect of that is a little hard to differentiate. Yes, I played the guitars. Yes, he played the piano, but like some of the piano cues were me. Some of the guitar things were his ideas. So it was very, it's so collaborative. It's hard to kind of pick it apart. It's like the brown sugar in a cookie. It's hard to take it out once it's in there and differentiate the ideas and where they came from.
Oh, yes, sure. I totally understand. And may I ask how you and Henry actually achieved to let the images speak for themselves and still find a way to underscore them, especially when it comes to action-oriented material? Because I never felt the action music was overbearing.
It's a trick I learned from Henry, and it's in action scores, and Henry is, he's one of the best at writing action music in my opinion. But it's a trick I learned from him, which was and what we really tried to do on this one, and it's more important on a film like this where it's not a bunch of CGI and a bunch of over the top production, but it's to follow the story in an action scene. It's so easy to write music that's very reactionary and visceral, and with every bang there's a big cymbal crash, and the music is just sort of noise and that helps to contribute to a cacophony of sound effects and all of that. But the one thing I learned from Henry years ago was to follow the story in an action scene, because if the movie's done well, which 21 Bridges is, and the action is done incredibly, you will always be able to follow the story. And that's where you should look when writing the music, is to not respond to the actual action, it's respond to the story. So by doing that, I think we stayed out of the way and helped tell the actual story that was going on, and not let the audience get lost in the amazing theatrics of it all, but to remind them that, hey, this is not just a cool set piece. This is the story of a guy who's experiencing this in real time. So,
And Alex, moving forward, which type of movie or score would you want to tackle in the future?
I would love to do another 21 Bridges. I would love to do another type of score that allows us to kind of do that retro 70s throwback. But because you don't get to do that very often. I love writing action scores. I love writing, more intimate things. But 21 Bridges really was a score that is pretty rare in that you hardly ever get the opportunity to do it. So I would love to do another one at some point. But one of the great things about film music is that you don't, it's one of the few artistic jobs where every film can be different. You can listen to Hans' scores, like the stuff he's done for Nancy Meyers, the stuff he's done for Chris Nolan, the stuff he's done for Disney and DreamWorks. They all sound completely different, and that's an incredible thing about film music, is that every film you can kind of take a step away from what you last did and do something completely different, and you don't have the struggle that like actors do when they do that sort of thing, where the industry and the audience expect a certain thing out of certain people. With film music, you don't have that pressure. So, I'm open to do whatever keeps it interesting for me.
Could you already elaborate on your upcoming movies such as Dhaka and Made in Italy?
Yeah, so Made in Italy is a wonderful little film that James Darcy is directing. It's his directorial debut, and it's a beautiful film. I'm really excited for people to hear it. It is a different type of score than, say, 21 Bridges. It's not a big action film, so for me it was a nice change. Like we talked about, it's something else. That film actually fell in my lap. Joe Russo actually introduced me and James, or James and I should say. So and James and I hit it off. We have a shared love and affinity for Joe Russo and Joe and Anthony's work. So it's great to collaborate with him on this one, and we're excited for everyone to see and hear it. And then Henry and I are at the moment doing another film as a co-write for Netflix, Dhaka, that the Russo brothers are also producing. So we're excited. It's working with the Russo brothers is incredible, because there's such great filmmakers, and that really has an effect when they're in the producing role. They know how to just pick the people that they want and trust on a film, and then let them do what they're good at, and it makes the process very, very enjoyable. So Henry and I are really excited about the score for Dhaka. We're excited for everyone to see it, and I'm excited for everyone to see Made in Italy as well.
Alex, is there anything else you would like to add to your music or 21 Bridges or your work with Henry? Anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, just to say that how proud I am of the score for 21 Bridges. I'm proud that everyone from STX to the Russos to Brian, they all let Henry and I do this type of score, which you hardly ever hear anymore. So I'm very proud of what Henry and I were able to accomplish. And I'm also proud, to share the co-credit with Henry, because, he is my mentor and friend.
Oh,
So
yes.
that's a big, big thing for me. And although it wasn't the first one, it's every time you go to the premiere and you see your name next to your mentor, it's a very humbling and rewarding experience. So I'm very proud of the score, and I hope everyone who watches the film loves it and loves the music as much as we love writing it.
Fantastic, and I hope you get to share many more credits with Henry, your great mentor.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you will be writing many more scores in the future, either as the lead composer with the solo credits or the co-credit with Henry, or some other very talented, inspiring, and great composer. So I wish you all the best for that. And
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah, a lot of fun. We should do it again. We'll do it on the
Yeah,
next one.
definitely. Alex, thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.